Such a beautiful and refreshing melody and tune, which is appropriate. That melody is about sitting and enjoying a refreshing and soothing, calm breeze. Just a beautiful traditional melody from the Levant region. And again, that was arranged by Issa Boulos. He was originally from Aleppo, Syria. And at the age of 13, he went to Paris and studied at the Paris Conservatoire. One of his teachers was the composer Olivier Messiaen. And you can really hear, at least I can really hear, the French influence as well as those sort of regional melodies from the Levant region. I think it's beautiful the way he combines those influences and also captures that spirit of it just being very refreshing. He described his music as neither Arab nor European, but both at the same time. I'm sad to say he's no longer with us, passed away in 2010, but his music is still very much with us. Again, I'm Tom Clues, Executive Director and Cellist of Crossing Borders Music, and with me Here with me is my colleague, violinist and composer and wonderful all-around musician, Mr. Rasa Mahmoudian. Hey, Rasa.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here and welcome everyone. My name is Rasa. I play the violin with Crossing Borders Music. I extensively teach with an organization called Ravinia. And also I play with different orchestras and some ensembles. For example, I play with Middle Eastern Ensemble at the University of Chicago. And I hope you enjoy every piece in this program.
Thank you so much. Rasa, I was reminded as we were listening of those sections that sound very much like an improvisation and a conversation between the different performers, just kind of making things up in conversation with one another. And I was reminded of how in rehearsal you explained how that's sort of a way of playing that you're very familiar with, and you were able to sort of help us understand how that worked.
Absolutely. So, growing up, in Iran, I was hearing a lot of melodic music, but most of them were poetic. So they're based on poems, and there are some liberties that the musicians take while performing them. And the music is mostly by ear, so it's not very rigidly notated. So there are lots of it happening that at the moment, however the musician feels, or it's a reflection of the environment they are in. So they perform every time differently. And in this piece, he was able to document that and ask us to take certain liberties, whatever is appropriate.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Really, some fine composing. And again, I really hear that sort of gentle, refreshing breeze. I also wanted to introduce our special guest today, Mr. Toufic Younes. Toufic is from Jordan and is in Amman now. It's late there, so thank you for being with us late in the evening. Toufic won, as I understand, a number of awards that some of which allowed him to study in London, where he earned degrees in music composition and an advanced degree in ethnomusicology from the University of London. After his bachelor's at Trinity College, he's now a pianist and educator and composer, and especially a concert presenter, a concert organizer. You do it all. I hope that you get some sleep. Welcome so much, Toufic.
Well, one has to be when there's so much that I'd like to do and I'd like to be involved in. And Jordan is a very beautiful place that has fantastic artists and wonderful musicians, truly talented musicians. And I am very privileged to be living here. I'm also Colombian by background, so I have a very strange mixture of Middle East, Latin American, and European music influences. Indeed, I did do my degrees in London, all of them. I had a number of awards mentioning the Chevening, the MBI, the Purcell, and a Queen Noor Endowment, plus, of course, the Abdel Mohsen Qattan Foundation for Arts. Those were my scholarships, which allowed me to actually continue and finish my degrees and come back to Jordan and hope I'd be able at some point to make a difference, if at all small, but to try and better the music life in the city and for both audience. And I am an educator by nature, so I teach extensively, and I quite enjoy bringing music to the masses. So through concerts or through education or through composition, that's, I guess, what my role is in life.
Wonderful. And something that we're all doing today at the very best that we can. So we want to shout out to everybody who's with us virtually today, watching this live stream. If you have comments, and especially if you have questions for us, we will get those in real time and be able to respond the very best that we can. Tariq, I wanted to ask you, was it common when you were able, through your achievements, to go to London and study in a Western music program? Was that something that people commonly did, sort of your classmates, or was that sort of a new and unique thing to you?
Not at all. In fact, the first scholarship, the Purcell Anniversary Fund, was created by Her Majesty Queen Noor Al Hussein to support a fledgling number of musicians to pursue further education at international conservatoires. And the first scholarship had 3 individuals on it, myself, Malak Tahir, and the wonderful Jordanian pianist Talat Tutunji. And they only sent 3 because the scholarship, unfortunately, did not continue due to many problems in its management. But anyway, we managed to continue. Now we do know that there are more people that are seeking education, a Western sort of classical education in music globally, and there are many names that have sort of are currently rising stars. But no, at the time when we were in Jordan, we didn't even have access to a lot of material to listen to. I think the first time I listened to The Rite of Spring was in my first year of college. And that was quite an amazing experience to be able to listen to anything that was past the 1900s in terms of composition. I was very fortunate to study with people who understood that and saw that I had something to offer, but allowed me to have a voice and at the same time to express myself through my background in the medium that I have chosen. I studied under the wonderful British composer Darrell Brunswick, and he has been instrumental in helping me find my voice, let's say.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tariq. And it's really neat to hear about your experience encountering some sort of pivotal works in the Western classical music tradition. And I hope that this live stream might inspire some people out there to explore, who may not be familiar with the Arab classical music tradition, to similarly explore works from that wonderful tradition. I think it's great to sort of be aware of the larger world out there. So I hope some people might be inspired to learn more, just as you learn more about Western classical music and the Rite of Spring and so forth. Our next piece is the Refugees Anthem, the International Refugees Anthem. And this is by Aryan Hu, and it's arranged by our very own Rasa, who did a wonderful job with this arrangement. Would you like to tell us about this piece we're about to hear, Rasa?
Sure thing. So again, this was composed by Aryan Hu. He's a Syrian refugee, but he lives in Beijing right now. This piece was commissioned by a refugee nation in 2016, and it was used at the Olympics on the same year. Aryan says about the music that he writes that music is the best language to deliver my message to humanity. Which is to love each other, and this language does not need or require any translation. In the process of, because we wanted to perform it, it was written for a full orchestra. So when we wanted to perform it, someone needed to arrange it, and I decided to keep the arrangement to very close to the composition and add the minimum possible to it, because again, this is supposed to be an anthem, and usually the anthem has certain characteristics. It's short, it's supposed to be melodic, that everyone remembers. So it was beautifully composed, and I tried so hard to keep it as original as possible.
Yeah, thank you, Ressa. One thing that I remember, well, first of all, I want to say, Ariane, thank you so much for your music. And if you're watching, thank you so much for allowing us to perform your work and share your work. And thank you, Ressa, for this wonderful arrangement. One thing that I really enjoyed about Ariane's comments about his own music is that he tried to write this not necessarily in a Syrian style, but in a style that refugees, no matter where they're from, anywhere in the world, could relate to. And Ressa, I really appreciate how that's something that you took to heart and how you arranged this, that it's not any one particular place, but it's for refugees around the world, no matter where you're from. This is a piece to honor you. So many people from the very beginnings of our organization at Crossing Borders Music have been refugees in our board, composers, performers, and so refugees everywhere. This piece is dedicated to you. Please enjoy Refugees Anthem by Ariane Hu, arranged by Rasa Mahmoodian. Such a proud piece of music. Thank you, Rasa, and congratulations. Yeah, wonderful to hear that. And again, for refugees everywhere who are part of our organization, who have been connected with our organization, who are not connected with our organization, that piece is in honor of you. Thank you. Rasa, I wanted to ask you a little bit what it was like growing up in Iran and playing and learning the violin and being a musician.
Well, when I was growing up, it was the wartime. I was born into the war, and then it was not something that was encouraged or something that was popular at that time. Especially, it was very handpicked people who could, you would know that they're playing instruments, especially in Western style, like learning a violin or guitar in Western traditional. So, but I had this opportunity that my family were kind enough to provide me this access. But what I remember, I had relatively very good teachers, and they were like, I had the instruction that a music student needs to improve, but at the same time, the access to materials was very difficult. Access to even the instruments or high quality instruments was very limited. Of course, it was after the revolution, it was during the war, and as we went through it, it got a little bit better. More and more people joined to learn instruments. You could find friends to play with, especially orchestras or ensembles started opening up. But it was some sort of challenge. But I was fortunate to get good instruction in Western style, and later I started learning about the music, Persian traditional music, on my own.
Wonderful. Tarek, I saw you nodding somewhat emphatically when Rasa was talking about issues of access.
Indeed. As I mentioned before, I mean, I think the first time I listened to Stravinsky was at college, and it was quite an eye-opener. There was a limited amount of, I mean, obviously, before the advent of the age of the internet, we had very limited amount of music available to us, and mostly whatever we had was due to that our teachers either traveled or got access to some sort of music for us to look at. My wonderful teacher that basically got me from the age of 15 to the level of to which I got a scholarship was Rula Nabil, and I remember that she had an extensive library but it was a private library. It wasn't for public access, and we as her students had the opportunity to look at music and read scores. And I think I learned very basic orchestration from simply looking at the scores she had at home. Then, of course, the idea that we tended to enjoy whatever was available to us without exploring something fresh and new and completely different. In 1993, I was given an opportunity to go before my bachelor's to the UK by a composer, Steve Martland, who invited me to come and spend a month learning minimalist music. And it was just a small advert in BBC Music that my teacher had on her table, and we sent my piece and I was accepted. So I went to the UK for a month, and I spent 2 wonderful weeks learning about minimalist music and writing music in a completely different manner. We relished access, but unfortunately it wasn't available to us at all. And it was difficult, and unless we traveled, we didn't have access to that. So yes, I definitely understand the whole dilemma of exposure at the time.
Yeah, thank you for that, both of you. Tarek, I'm wondering, speaking of access, how accessible is music composed by Arab composers for Western instruments? Is that something that you were aware of growing up? And as a composer now, do you feel, what sorts of platforms are available?
Currently, there are very few. There are some efforts around the world, some by very dear friends of mine in Canada called Dozan World, and they're doing a fantastic job at trying to document as many Arab composers as possible. There are many efforts around the world to try and collate the works of Arab composers that is available to them. Again, a lot of these are written in notation purely for a specific ensemble, and that ensemble would have it, and no one else would. And because of that, so the access, you'd have to go into people's private collections to find out what they've got and what they've accumulated over the years. There's no one particular library or registration or the setup is there, really. I mean, for any kind of intellectual property registration in the country and in countries around us, but do we go through those hoops and loops in order for us to actually get it done? No, we don't. I mean, we compose something for, like I wrote for you at Crossing Borders, and therefore, you know, you have access to that material. But unless somebody knows I exist online and then they contact me directly, I mean, it's impossible for me to know who would publish my work. That's number one. Number two is the fact that a lot of the music that is actually written in the Arab world, we have to make a very important distinction that there's a mixture, there's a melange of Western European classical music and Arabic classical music, and they are very much intertwined in the region. And especially these days, the composers the Arabic classical composers tend to work with Western notation per se, and with that they would be able to disseminate the music more widely. The idea of notating Arabic maqams, which have a lot of quarter tones, and all of these are new and fresh things that happened in the past 40, 50 years through scholarship in Egypt and in the Levant and in other parts of the Arab world, like the Maghreb. So that caused a problem of access, in a sense that music in the classical Arabic music in general is very much an oral tradition. You just don't. It's not written. Teacher to student to further students, and so it's a tradition that continues on. And musicians were troubadours that traveled from place to place, and they would perform their music, and somebody would copy it, but nobody would actually write it down. And that continued even when they started using Western instruments or the like. They wouldn't write anything down. They would actually just perform something together as an ensemble. Arabic music is very monophonic. It's not polyphonic. So in a sense, if you know the tune and you know how to improvise, then voila, all the power to you, and you're part of the ensemble.
I appreciate that. Just for anybody who's watching who may not be familiar with those terms, monophonic meaning that there's one melody line that sort of everybody shares and plays at the same time, versus which is the sort of traditional Arab musical approach, versus polyphony, meaning that different people are playing different tunes or different parts that fit together. They're separate, but they go together. Each one being different, which is more common in a Western classical, European classical tradition. Thanks for that, Tora. I am reminded you shared some sort of unique difficulties of using Western notation, which isn't really adequate, frankly, to capture the subtleties, including some of the music that we'll hear today, where there are notes that you can't really play on a European piano. They're sort of in between the cracks of two notes. A black key and a white key are two separate notes on the piano, but there are notes that are not quite that black key or not quite that white key, and they're sort of in between the cracks. And the Western notational system doesn't have a great way of capturing those notes. Toufic, I'm also reminded you shared that Western notation reads from left to right, whereas the Arabic script reads from right to left. And so composers have had all kinds of sort of innovative ways of responding to those difficulties. I think it's fascinating. And I also wanted to thank you for fascinating and inspiring to see that sort of creativity in response to those challenges. Speaking of, you mentioned the challenge of access and mentioned Dozan World, and I'm so thankful to you, Toufic, for putting me and Crossing Borders Music in touch with that organization, and we're going to look to see how we can work together to be the change that we want to see. So thank you for that. Our next piece is by Toufic Succar. He was born in 1922. And we're so thankful to be able to play this early work of his. Rasa, you were really drawn to Toufic's music. What was it about it that drew you in?
Yeah, so when we were kind of preparing for this program, researching it, that takes a long time to actually put together a program like this. I came across a composer, and which the first thing usually you go to YouTube, and then you branch out to other databases or places that we can find music and kind of research it. So I came across a composer from Lebanon that I never heard before, and as soon as I started playing the music, either was a string quartet or piano solo music, I was just stunned by it. It was like, this is beautiful. Like, why do I not know this composer? So, um, it, Succar, Toufic is using a lot of melodic content of what I know. I heard there were a lot of cross-cultural melodies between Iran and in Middle East. We share a lot of things, not only like dolma or other food, but we share melodies as well. And there are lots of them that I grew up listening to. And yeah, the way he uses these melodies, these folkloric melodies, and the traditional music and integrate into his music, it is fascinating. So again, this was, as Tarek was mentioning, it was very um, eye-opening to me that this is a very accomplished composer, and I never heard about him before. And it was really hard to even find any music by him in print. So it took us a long time to find it, and we were able to perform this wonderful piece.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I want to give a big thank you, merci beaucoup, to Nena, Toufic's wife Nena, who, along with their children, helped us to access this score. I think this is the first time that this work is being shared online, as far as I am aware. An early string quartet in 3 movements. The first movement quotes the melody Under the Olive Tree. In the second, the love song Let's Go to the Valley, Hand in Hand, a beautiful movement based on that love song. And then the third is an original tune by Toufic, and then another traditional melody, The Beautiful. Again, we really want to thank Nena for her help in providing this score to us. And we also want to mention that Toufic identifies as a Lebanese composer. Nena explained that this is an appropriate term or a Mediterranean composer because of the unique geography and musical influences on Lebanese music, the Mediterranean influences. So please enjoy an wonderful early string quartet by Toufic Succar.
So the next performance is a solo oud improvisation by Issa Boulos. Issa is a Palestinian-American oud player. He's a composer, he's an ethnomusicologist, and educator. In this piece, he performs the 14 and a third Junes. And Issa writes that 14 and a third Junes explores the melodic contours of various maqamat. Maqams are the modes in Arabic traditional music. And this piece, he explores maqams like Rahid al-Rah, Hijaz, Nahavand, Bayati, Kurdi, Nikriz, Rast, Ajam, and Hijaz Kar. Although the piece is improvised, it relies on developing pre-composed short melodic ideas and expanding them according to the maqam's tradition and neo-traditional approaches and techniques. The underlying component of this piece that keeps the piece together is the meaning. June was the month when Issa's family used to spend more time together. And the central idea behind this piece is that Issa's father had a stroke in 1982. Which interrupted such gatherings. And unfortunately, he passed away on June 10th, 1983, when Issa was 15. He spends 14 Junes and a third with his father.
Such a beautiful, heartfelt, poignant tribute from Issa to his father. I think it's almost appropriate if you listen carefully enough, you can hear the rain on the evening when Issa was performing that. Such an evocative, beautiful piece of remembrance and tribute. So Issa, if you're watching, thank you for sharing your beautiful music with us. And we were so honored to be able to give the world premiere of this new piece by our special guest composer and ethnomusicologist, concert presenter, pianist, educator. He does it all. And he wrote this beautiful piece for us that I can't wait to share with you. Toufic, thank you for being with us, and thank you for the beautiful music that you let us entrusted to us to share.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm very pleased to be here.
Would you like to tell us a bit about this piece and why you wrote it and who you wrote it for?
Well, basically, this piece was actually commissioned by your Crossing Borders Music. When Tom, you approached me a few months back, and you mentioned that you would like to play something for string quartet by me. And at the time, I have been, thinking of the idea of writing a string quartet for quite a while, and it was initiated actually through the wonderful work of the Ittihad String Quartet in this country, which was instrumentally created through the hard work of Fadi Hattar, a cellist, a Jordanian cellist. And he is a wonderful musician, and he has always asked me for a string quartet for the longest time ever. So when you contacted me, I just decided, why not just, this is the opportunity to write something small. And I wrote Journey 1. And thank you very much for enjoying it and playing it, because it was a labor of love, really. I quite enjoyed writing it.
Well, we enjoyed playing it very much and can't wait to share it. You had mentioned, Toufic, that you named it because it is a journey. I sense that too, in the sense of we start off in the music in a certain place, and then we go off into different adventures. We go off into this kind of creepy waltz in the middle. It sounds very, very sinister and spooky. And we have these very intense chords in the middle, with everybody in the quartet just holding on to these intense, loud chords for a long time. And then eventually we go back home, but we're a little bit changed after the journey. What do you think? That's my interpretation as a performer.
In fact, that's a fantastic interpretation. I wouldn't have put it any better. The idea that people in music do go on a journey, and if they and it's a story, and if you go from one end to the other, you'll end up with an experience that either changes you or gives you a different perspective on anything, really. And that's why this piece is perhaps a little schizophrenic in certain parts, because I actually enjoy the melange of different things altogether, different styles, different rhythms, different. I try my best. I'm not trying my best. I tend to do that because I enjoy doing that, and I love the amalgamation of all of them, and then finally coming up with a final chapter, let's say, that brings you home. And you put it beautifully. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Toufic. And I did want to share with everybody watching and listening, Toufic called this piece Journey 1. And he invited us for our input as far as the title, because he's not convinced that title is quite the right title for this piece.
Yep.
Now, like you, Toufic, we're a bunch of musicians. We are not poets. We're not great with words. And so that's why we want to hear, and Toufic would like to hear from you, listeners. about your ideas about this piece, and especially what you might title it, because that title, the music is all set, but that title might change. Is that
yeah, definitely. I mean, the idea is it's such a wonderful opportunity to be able to broadcast to so many people and get so many people's input. As I said before the show to you all, I tend to write music and then with the title being an afterthought, and I'm constantly confused. So I end up with these generic names with 1, 2, 3, 4 after them. So I would very much like to hear what people can, what it evokes in people, and it helps me to come up with some sort of a title that maybe is a little bit better than Journey One, a little bit more creative than that. So yeah, please, so world. Anyone.
Beautiful. So we're in an invitation to be part of our creative process. And without further ado, please enjoy, for now titled Journey One, String Quartet. I think those are the longest 2 notes I've ever played in my life. Tariq, I gotta ask you how you were inspired for that ending.
I think it must have been Goretzky. I was very heavily influenced by Goretzky, especially Symphony No. 3 and the ending of the big fugue at the beginning, the big canon. And I was very, and I loved these endings. And there was also another Russian composer, the name escapes me right now, but a 20th century Russian composer that also wrote a piano concerto that ended also with this kind of drone in the end. And I've always loved it. I think I've used it several times.
A very dramatic gesture.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Tariq. Congratulations. It was an honor to be entrusted to share that music of yours.
Thank you very much for enjoying it.
Our next piece is the first movement of a string quartet by Mohammad Fairouz, an American composer. The string quartet is called The Named Angels, and it's called that because it's about the angels that are shared in the Abrahamic traditions, the Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions. There are certain angels that are common to all of those traditions, and each movement of the string quartet is named after one of them, this one named after Michael, or Michael. Fairouz writes that Michael, or Michael, quote, brings thunder to earth, but is also identified in the Quran as an angel of mercy, and in the book of Revelation, he leads God's armies against Satan's forces. The movement captures that dichotomy as it vacillates between thunderous gestures and what I've marked as hymn of mercy in the score. So that's what Mohammad Fairouz had to say about his piece. Rasa, my understanding is that growing up in Iran, that you were sort of familiar with stories about angels.
Yes. So yeah, growing up, the stories of religious stories of the prophets, which there are many. Apparently, there are 124,000 prophets, and most of them have some interesting stories. And of course, the angels. These are the folkloric stories shared in the region. So again, as you mentioned, these are shared in the between the faiths, and Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And this kind of growing up, I remember I was reading these stories as a child, whether it was in school or as available books that at that time was available to us. And I would imagine these stories, kind of visualizing these. And so I always had a certain image for Israfil, or who is came to Prophet Muhammad and asked him to iqra, or to read, or about Israel, who is the angel of death. And so I know some other friends that later we spoke about it, that how we visualize these stories and how affected us personally. In this 4 movements, we are just performing the first movement, but it's really interesting that in my research, Muhammad is referring to these 4 pieces and this piece in general as his reflection to the what is happening in Middle East at these. It was composed a couple years ago, but as we know, the problems or issues in the Middle East they're not the new things. They've been going on for many, many years. So this is we all grew up with this. I think Mohammad Fairouz grew up with these folklore stories, and this was his reflection on them, and also the reflection on the kind of the political issues of the region.
Thank you so much, Rasa, for sharing. And thank you for a couple of those suggested titles, The Endearing Swindler and Como Rabi. Thank you for your ideas. Keep them coming about titles for that last piece and what you heard in that music. And now, Rasa, I really liked what you said about painting a picture, having a picture in your mind. And I think that Mohammed Fighters does such a beautiful job in this piece of painting a scene. So hope you enjoy this very intense music, and yet also sometimes that hymn of mercy, the very inward-looking or merciful melody, as well as the thunderous themes. Please enjoy this beautiful piece. Such an exciting conclusion. Wow. Wow. Nice job, Rasa. Great playing. Thank you, Tarek. Well, we have two pieces left, which we'll hear without pause in between them. These are compositions by Mr. Issa Boulos, who's a Palestinian and American, well, he does many things like Tarek, an educator, a composer, a performer, oudist, musicologist, ethnomusicologist, and we were so grateful to him for sharing with us his music, his expertise, his insights on the music, and for inviting us to perform with him in arrangements that he made just for this opportunity. Ressa, would you like to tell us about the two pieces that we'll hear?
Absolutely. So the first piece is called Samai Nahavand. And usually this title, when there is a title of Samai, is a poetic form borrowed from Ottoman, Turkish Ottoman, and still the Arabic regions, the composers are coming up with new samais in different maqams, which are the modes. This title, kind of the first part, Samai, refers to the form of the song, which again is a poetic form. And the second part, Nahavand, refers to the maqam, the mode of the song. Usually there is a third part. It's the name of the composer, whoever wrote that Samai. And so this is supposed to be Samai Nahavand Bulus, or to have a full title in a traditional way. Yeah, it has a very exciting rhythm. It's a kind of, usually in Western style, we have either music in 4 or 3. We say 1, 2, 3, 4. But this one is a little bit more complex than that. It's a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. That creates a very exciting groove. The second piece is called Raqs al-Junub, or Raq, Dance of the South. And Issa writes that the piece is about how we react to situations that are unfamiliar or uncomfortable to us. The piece relies on the tension between our inner struggles and how we often tend to disguise such tensions through a different presentation of ourselves on the outside.
Thank you so much, Ressa. And thank you for explaining a bit about the maqam. There's a sound that I can't quite make in my throat to pronounce that, but if you want to Google it, M-A-Q-A-M, and it's the series of modes, or the groups of notes that you'll hear in a certain piece of music, often going from one group of notes that's used in a certain way to a different set of a group of notes that are used in a certain way, and then maybe on to a third. And so we sort of tell a story. At some moments, you'll hear Issam and Rasa using maqam that have a series of notes, again, that you can't really find on a piano. If Ressa was playing piano, he wouldn't be able to play along with Issa. Fortunately, he plays the violin, and he can put his fingers wherever he wants on that string and make whatever kinds of pitches he can, whatever kinds of pitches he wants to. And so you'll hear some beautiful, beautiful music by Mr. Issa Boulos. Before we go, I wanted to thank our guests, Rasa and Tarek. This has been such an interesting and enlightening conversation. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart to both of you, and to all of the performers, including our guest, Mr. Issa Boulos, who you're about to hear again, and all of the other composers. We're so appreciative to be able to share your music on this platform. I wanted to thank behind the scenes Thavary Krouch. Oh, yes, thank you. There's Issa Boulos' website, and in a moment we'll see Rasa's and Tarek's. So please check these wonderful, there's Rasa's, rasamahmoudian.com. Please check out their websites, learn more about them, learn more about their music. Also behind the scenes, there's Taufik's website. Also behind the scenes, Ms. Savi Chorm, who is a board member of Crossing Borders Music. We're so glad to have her helping out also behind the scenes. We want to thank also all of our other board members from Crossing Borders Music. Thank you to our board who make these sorts of events possible. You can learn more about us at crossingbordersmusic.org. There's the website on the screen. Our mission as a nonprofit organization is to use music to promote the dignity of people from all cultures. So many people to thank. Just one more moment. We have the Paul M. Angell Family Foundation, who have been very generous sponsors to all of our programs for years now. We really appreciate them sort of underwriting this concert series, as well as Second Unitarian Church, who provided the beautiful space in the videos that you see, as well as rehearsal space. The Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events of the City of Chicago, and also the Illinois Arts Council Agency. Whew. So thank you. Plus, all of you, we want to thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. And now finally, without further ado, our last two pieces. This is the very first time that almost anybody has heard these brand new arrangements by Mr. Issa Boulos. So please enjoy these two beautiful pieces, dances by Mr. Issa Boulos. Thank you.